This is how to succeed with your plan for failure. And round of applause for Bill Smith. Oh God, I need to stop talking now.
Thank you. Yeah. Whenever you think of Bill, think of failure. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm William Smith, but I do go by Bill, and I'm with Jamf. And I'm going to have several barcodes show up throughout my slides, so you may want to have your phones ready to scan them. They're just mostly additional information in case you're wanting to look something up. And my slides will be available for download through the JNUC portal too. So let's talk about failure. I was using Jamf Pro more than 20 years ago when it was known as Casper. And all it did was image computers from a rusting, spinning hard drive. I used it as a customer starting in 2003. Then I became a consultant and began teaching Jamf customers how to use it. Then I came to work for Jamf almost about 9 years ago, 9 years in January. Over that time, Jamf Pro has become a huge product with tons of features. Now, I don't claim to know every little nuance of Jamf Pro, but I know a lot of it. Then back in January, I learned something new that kind of blew my mind. I get the privilege of working with some of the Jamf partners, their consultants who deliver services for their customers as well as for Jamf, and they're some of the smartest people I know. But even they discover something new every once in a while that kind of blows their mind. I get a message from a partner, Kevin, in Slack, looking for help with the problem. Customer deleted an important config profile in Jamf Cloud instance. How can I recover it? I replied that we don't back up the database, but we kind of take snapshots instead. We could roll back a snapshot, but our cloud operations group really doesn't like doing that. Rolling back a snapshot or rolling back the database means that we're going to be losing any kind of updates and changes between now and when we restore. It can be like using a sledgehammer to pound in a nail. But Kevin was really interested in rolling back. He asked how often we take snapshots. All I knew was we take snapshots multiple times a day, but I really didn't know how frequently. Then Kevin comes back with this. Whoa, looks like in the change management log, you can access a deleted profile and clone it. How did I not know this? He posted that message, and a couple of their partners in Slack started watching that thread. I said, oh, this is new to me too. I opened up my Jamf Pro instance to go see what he was talking about. And we get even more partners looking at this thread. He is elated. How is this not documented? This potentially saved us hours of frustration. Is it not documented, I ask? Now I go looking for the documentation on this, and it's definitely an undocumented feature. Kevin keeps describing what he's found. You can't restore a deleted configuration profile, but you can definitely clone it to a new profile. Neat, he says. Now, we've got more partners and even some Jamfs watching this thread. Another partner, Craig, chimes in. This is a great find. Kevin explains what happened. Someone new to Jamf deleted an 802.1x Wi-Fi profile. And when you delete a profile, that means computers are immediately unscoped and could be falling off the organization's network. These profiles sometimes include, or usually include, certificates and settings that are a little more complex than ordinary 802.1x profiles, or even WPA2, WPA3 personal Wi-Fi profiles. And I can understand why Kevin was urgently wanting to get this profile restored. Restoring it instead of having to recreate it saved hours of work, having to find the certificates or possibly even having to recreate those certificates. And how often do we spend hours creating these complex configurations and we don't document them? Here's that feature that Kevin found. I'm going to click Computers and then go to Configuration Profiles. And you'll see here, I only have one profile for restrictions. I'm missing a Wi-Fi profile. I'll go to Settings in the navigation pane, and I'll click Change Management, where I see just a few minutes ago, I deleted a Wi-Fi profile. I need to get that back. When I click the profile's name, I see it like I'm about to edit another profile, but notice at the top, it's telling me this is a deleted profile and it's read-only. What I would learn later is that Jamf Pro actually marks objects for deletion. It doesn't actually immediately delete anything. Cleanup routines that turn on periodically, that run periodically, handle most of the deletions later on. Now, I won't really be restoring it. At the bottom, I can only clone it. I'm going to remove the word copy from the profile's name, and then I'm going to click Save. Now, if I go back to my list of computer configuration profiles, I find that my Wi-Fi profile is back, so hot dog. But this feature is only for configuration profiles, and it doesn't support any other object type. Now, maybe someday in the future it will. I'd like to see us add more to this. So what I'm going to be talking about with you today is about Jamf Pro objects. Objects are those things that any administrator can create in their Jamf Pro server. Profiles and pre-stage enrollments are just a couple of things, but there's more than 80 possible object types that you can create. Others are advanced searches, smart groups, static groups, extension attributes, policies and patch policies, and packages and printers. And how do you recover those if you delete one? All it takes is to accidentally delete or modify an object that's critical to a workflow before we realize that we really have no easy way of getting that back other than recreating it. That's fine for categories or site names. Those are simple. But what about that script that you've been tweaking and testing and working on all week, only to realize that early on you kind of deleted some important code and you got to get that code back? Well, Jamf Pro has no versioning system. The worst thing you can do as an administrator is fail to plan, because someday you'll delete that profile, or you'll modify that policy, or tweak that script so much and wish you could get it back. Now, I'm not here today to give you solutions, but rather I'm going to make you think about planning to fail and give you some ideas for recovery. For those of you with on-premises Jamf Pro installations, we're going to be talking about something very simple, your database backups. But more importantly, we're going to be talking about your database restores. Regardless of whether you host your own server or use Jamf Cloud, we'll talk about something that we all hate, which is documenting our servers. And as part of that documentation, you can download it and include some of those objects that you create. And you can use those downloaded objects for version control as well. Jamf Pro doesn't have a built-in time machine, but there are times when we've changed something and you want to go back to something earlier. And for those of you who have the resources to script and do some DevOps work, there's nothing that beats having a system in place that automates all of that for you. Some of you yet haven't moved to Jamf Cloud. You're in control of your own servers, specifically your MySQL database server, which is where your Jamf Pro objects live. That means you're also responsible for your own database server backups. Now, if you're a Jamf Cloud customer, you can tune out for just a few minutes, but come back when I start waving my hands frantically. All right, for you folks on-prem, I love mantras, and this is one of my favorites. You don't make a backup plan, you make a restore plan. That means your backups each night are only half of what you really should be doing. The other half is testing your restores. Generally, you can create a backup two different ways in today's server world. You can run a MySQL database dump or a virtual machine snapshot. Your environment's going to kind of dictate which one's better for you. First, if your Jamf Pro server is running on a physical server and not a virtual machine, you're going to have to back up using a MySQL database dump. A database dump is literally a plain text file in a format that MySQL can read and recreate your database. It's crazy easy to configure, and Jamf gives you both GUI and command line tools to do all of that. We're going to look at those in just a little bit. That hardware server is going to need its own backup system, and that's because you really should dump your database to a local file and not back it up to something like and then back it up to something like a tape backup system. Tape is still, here in 2024, the cheapest way of storing backup data. Your backup system is going to give you version control, something like a weekly full backup and daily incrementals, and then you can keep full backups from each month for like the next year. And it's version control that allows you to pick just how far back that you can go back and restore an object to your Jamf Pro server. We're going to talk a little bit more about version control in just a little bit. You're going to want to use the Jamf Pro server tools that get installed with your Jamf Pro server. We make them for both Linux and for Windows. And you have the choice of using either the command line tool or the GUI, which is literally just a graphical interface that sits on top of the command line tools. The Jamf Pro server tools give you an easy way to take care of all the MySQL and server scheduling commands. Now, I mentioned earlier, you don't make a backup plan, you make a recovery plan. And that means you need a second server for restoring your database dump. Never, ever, ever, ever restore backups to your production server. And this second server can either be a physical server or it can be a virtual server. It doesn't really make a difference. Since all of you, finally, you'll want to keep the latest installers you used for MySQL, for Java, and Jamf Pro available as well. Now, if your database server is running on a virtual machine, your backup process, and maybe even your restore process, is a lot easier. Your VM solution is your backup solution and your version control system. And you have a choice of either restoring the entire snapshot or restoring just the database dump. Now, the best advice that I can give you is if you're running a database server on a virtual machine, just treat it like a physical server and prepare it the exact same way. It's usually a bad practice to back up a snapshot of a database while it's live, but you can safely dump a database while it's live because it's the MySQL process that handles that database dump. And it gives you the option to restore the database to retrieve a lost Jamf Pro object instead of the entire snapshot. Now finally, some of you may have spent time figuring out how to replicate your database to another database server, and that's great, but it's not a backup. Replication isn't version control. I'm showing you the Windows version of Jamf Pro server tools here, but the Linux tools look and behave the same way. You'll find them in these paths. The bin directory contains two items of interest, the server tools GUI and the graphical version of the tools, and the Jamf Pro item is the command line version. This is what the GUI is using, so their behavior is going to be identical. If I double-click the GUI tool, chances are it's already configured to back up your server. If it's not, you should do that so that you can back up the database and get those database dumps. Your snapshot system may not always successfully restore a database that was backed up while it was live. Now, in the navigation pane on the left, I've selected Server Tools, and on the right, I've configured the GUI to point to my database server, which is on a separate dedicated server. This is what Server Tools is going to use to connect to the database for backups. Then click Schedule Backups on the left and configure it to do a database dump every day. Now here, I'm keeping the last 14 backups by default, and they save to a database backups folder on the server. That's the folder that you need to make sure that your server's backup system is watching. Something else that you should do is go into your Jamf Pro server and set your notifications to email you when your database backups run. And I recommend that you do this both for successful backups as well as the failures. That takes care of the backup plan. So what's the restore plan? Here are the steps that you should follow. First, your restore server doesn't have to be the same operating system as your production server. You can restore a backup on Windows to a server that's running on Linux or vice versa. Jamf Pro and its components aren't reliant on the OS itself. And I suggest you do this on a virtual machine. VMs are expendable, and if you mess up, you can just simply throw it away and start over. What you do need are the installers, the equivalent versions of MySQL, Java, and Jamf Pro that are running on your production server. Now, you probably already do this, but keep these installers somewhere after upgrading your Jamf Pro server, and you'll never have a problem finding these. Installing everything is pretty simple. You'll start with MySQL. You'll have a few choices to make, like creating a MySQL password, but for the most part, you're just going to accept the defaults. Right after installing MySQL, you'll need 3 pieces of information. You'll need its server address. The IP address will be fine, but sometimes you can use localhost if you're installing the software on the same server. And I strongly recommend just keeping it simple. Do all of your restore server on the same server. Don't try to set up a second server. You're not trying to replicate your production environment. And you'll need to create a username and a password for Jamf Pro to connect to the database. Then just install Java and install Jamf Pro. And as part of the Jamf Pro installer, you're going to have to give it the address of your MySQL server, its IP address or localhost, and the username and the password that you just created a few moments ago. When you've done all that, you're going to open a web browser and you're going to go to localhost:8443. And if you see the license agreement, stop. You don't need to configure anything at that point. You've got a new Jamf Pro server running. Now you just need to stop Tomcat, which is the application that makes Jamf Pro work. On Windows, I'd open the Services MMC and I'd locate the Apache Tomcat service and I would just simply click Stop. Now there's an equivalent for that on Linux as well, so to stop the Tomcat service. On my production Jamf Pro server, I'm going to open the database backups folder. And remember, you can find that path to the folder in the Jamf Pro Server Tools GUI application, or you can use the command line tool. And my backups go back 2 weeks on this server. So if I need something older, I'll need to actually go and restore from my server's backup system, from those tapes. I want to copy one of my backups to my restore server. Maybe I need to go back a week. And here's where the Jamf Pro Server Tools come in again. You just installed them when you installed Jamf Pro a moment ago. So in the GUI application, I'm going to choose Backup and Restore on the left, and then click Restore Backup on the right. When the restore finishes, I'll start the Tomcat service once again, and I'll wait for the server to come up. And when I see the login window, I can log in with any username and password that I would have done so with my production server. It's the same database. Here's where I need to wave to you folks in Jamf Cloud land and tell you to start paying attention now. Now, I have access to my accidentally deleted or modified Jamf Pro objects, and I can start work on restoring my object to my production server. That's what I'm going to be spending the rest of my time talking about. So from here on, it doesn't matter if you're running Jamf Pro on premises or in Jamf Cloud. So let's look next at a few ways to get a Jamf Pro object, like a configuration profile or a script or a policy, downloaded from one Jamf Pro server or a backup copy and uploaded to another. We have a few ways we can do this. First, 3 object types in Jamf Pro actually have download buttons to make it easier to copy an object out of your server. Every configuration profile for both computers and mobile devices has a download button. And considering profiles can be some of the more complex settings that you're going to manage, I think that's really, really handy. Jamf Pro has an upload button at the top of the list of configuration profiles. That means without any complicated scripting, you can copy a profile from one server to another, or maybe from your backup to your production server. We finally added the ability to download packages in Jamf Pro 11.5, and I recommend that you keep a copy of all of your software installer packages outside of Jamf Pro, simply because they're objects, just like your configuration settings, and you'll be less inclined to keep old packages in Jamf Pro that way. Make it a habit to keep only what you need for management in Jamf Pro, and keep copies of your older files and settings outside of Jamf Pro in a version control system. Scripts also have a download button. Now, while you could just as easily copy the text of a script in Jamf Pro and paste it into a text file and then simply upload that to your other server, if you're a scripter like I am, you might go through several iterations of the script over time and adding a little more functionality or cleaning up some of that old code. Scripts are where version control is going to become really important, because one slight change can break a script, and Jamf Pro gives you no way to compare to an older version and see what you did wrong. But that's only 3 object types out of 80. What about the rest? Well, we have Jamf Migrator. That's a tool by one of my coworkers, Leslie Halou. He built it with the idea of copying Jamf Pro objects directly from one server to another, but it can also be used just to download the JSON or the XML data in plain text. And you can store those downloaded files to a service that supports simple version control, like Dropbox, or even something that's a little bit more complex, like maybe a GitHub repository. Jamf Migrator supports more than 35 object types. It allows you to download from and upload to any Jamf Pro server. It lets you get everything all at once, or just selected objects, like a single advanced computer search or a restricted software policy. And let's see how it works. I want to download all of my scripts from Jamf Pro. So under the macOS tab, I'll select Scripts, and then I'll click Go. And in just a few seconds, Jamf Migrator downloads 34 scripts from my server. I can select one of the files, and I can use Quick Look to view it. Now, what you're looking at is all the information that Jamf Pro needs to recreate that script. It's just a plain text file using XML. But it's not difficult to read, and it's not hard to compare what you see in this file with what you see in Jamf Pro. Everything here is describing what you would see in the GUI. All of this, upload and download, is working through Jamf Pro's APIs. You can append /API to the end of your Jamf Pro server's URL to view the schema, which is just a kind of a guide for how to format your data. And Jamf Pro has the API reference and other documentation and example scripts snippets at developer.jamf.com. APIs are just a way of exchanging data with the server like Jamf Pro in the form of plain text. And when you're dealing with plain text, you have the ability to use command line tools to script things. Using a script, I can ask Jamf Pro to give me a list of all of my scripts. Then I can choose to do something to one or more items in that list. I can assign a category, I can change a category for a policy, or I can upload completely new objects like a smart computer group. What I'm showing you here is the information for the same script object that I downloaded using Jamf Migrator and I just viewed with Quick Look. And again, this is everything Jamf Pro needs to recreate it. And what you see here is the command you'd run to in your script to get that information. So we have a few ways to download Jamf Pro objects. Some methods like downloading from within Jamf Pro itself are pretty limited. Others like Jamf Migrator are much friendlier and a lot more robust. And the Jamf Pro API is not only robust, it's our gateway to everything that we can access. So what do we do with all these XML and JSON files that we're downloading? We put them in a place where we can apply version control. All right, what's version control? It's the practice of managing change, usually to code. But it doesn't have to be just code. It could be drafts of the document of your new book. An author might decide that a chapter that they deleted probably sometime back in the first draft makes sense to bring back in the final draft. They don't just delete all of their work that they put into it. Instead, they keep a copy somewhere just in case. It had value at one point, and maybe it still has value. It's also a good way to see how something changes over time. You may find your organization already has some sort of version control, like GitHub, especially if you have an in-house developer or a DevOps group. But even if you don't, you may already have something, be using some sort of service that supports version control, like Dropbox. Let's look at that. Now, just a little bit ago, I showed you how to use Jamf Migrator to download all of my scripts to Jamf Pro, and what I can do with them is keep them on Dropbox. And the most basic and even the family plans of Dropbox allow you to manage version history up to 30 days. But professional and business and enterprise plans, they allow you to manage history up to 365 days. And you can even purchase version history that goes back for 10 years. Now, every time I modify a file, Dropbox creates a new version. I only see the current version unless I specifically go looking for something else. I selected a file a little bit ago, and let's assume I accidentally pressed Command-Delete. Now it's in the trash. And by the way, does anybody know the keyboard command to actually move it from the trash back to where it was? Command-Delete. So Command-Delete to put it in the trash, and if it's in the trash, Command-Delete to move it out of the trash back to where it was. All right, but let's assume that I also emptied the trash. All right, here's the Dropbox to the rescue. I log in and locate my scripts folder. I'm going to click on it, and sure enough, my script is gone. In the breadcrumb trail at the top, I'll click the enclosing folder. Then I'll hover over the scripts folder, and I'm going to click the little ellipsis, and I'm going to choose Activity and rewind this folder. Now, on the next screen in the lower right corner, I'm going to click Recover a Deleted File. Then I'll select the file that I want to restore. And it was only deleted just a few minutes ago. I'll click Restore. And my file is back in place. It's pretty simple, but it's also really powerful. I just need to make sure that I'm downloading my Jamf Pro objects to a folder that's syncing with Dropbox. If you've kept an eye on the Jamf Nation user conferences over the past years, you may realize that I am not the first person to actually be talking about using the API to download objects or even do version control for Jamf Pro Server. 10 years ago, back at JNUC 2015, Jeffrey Compton gave one of the earliest talks about downloading objects from what was then called the Jamf Software Server, which is today's Jamf Pro Server. And at the time, he positioned his JSS migration utility, there's that word migrate again, which was a bash script, as a way of getting all of your configurations from one server to another without all the cruft that you would have had built up in the computers and devices and anything else that you didn't really want to bring over. He positioned it as a cleanup type script. I think Jeffrey's work broke the ground for the others who were interested in making the scripts that they put into Jamf Pro were protected and versioned. A few years later, Adam Furby released his GitHub project called Git2JSS. It was pretty popular. It was a really popular project with more than 50 forks. And while I don't believe it's nearly as active as it used to be, I still see some contributions and some pull requests from within the last year. Git2JSS inspired a JNUC 2018 presentation by my friends at Target Corporation, Brian Lasham and Brad Schmidt, where they found managing code in web applications like Jamf Pro was pretty difficult. So they put together a system where scripts didn't go into Jamf Pro first. Instead, they went through a peer review process first, and then they were staged in GitHub, and then an automated process by Jenkins pulled them from GitHub and put them into Jamf Pro. And one of the cool things about that was it allowed them to take away Jamf Pro privileges from most of their accounts for accessing scripts and making them kind of read-only to all the other administrators. And just a few years later, at JNUC 2021, Hiroshi Ishikawa took inspiration from that Target presentation to build his own system using GitHub as the source of truth and GitHub Actions to manage the workflow. He expanded the scope of the project from just scripts to include policies and categories and computer groups, 3 other things. So over the past 10 years, more than a few people have recognized the importance of version control with Jamf Pro. Currently, Jamf has nearly 400 votes for feature requests asking for some type of version control, whether it's integration with GitHub or Bitbucket or something else. If you're interested in this too, I encourage you to search for version control on Jamf Ideas and vote that up. Until then, customers are going to have to put together their own systems for managing version control. And automation has to be a big part of that because when something is automated, it's repeatable, reliably repeatable, and it's going to be faster too. I don't like talking about something without leaving you with just some kind of resource, so I've put together a script for you too. And you're going to find it at jamf.it/backup Jamf Pro objects. And that's separated by hyphens. And what I can give you is the example syntax to call the Jamf Pro API to put together your own solutions. You need to set up a few things like your own Jamf Pro URL, a client ID, and a client secret, and it'll download the JSON or the XML for more than 40 of the most common Jamf Pro objects. I have a saying, to script as admin, to comment divine, and I have commented the dickens out of this script and added a lot of detail and explanation as much as possible, even for someone who's not that familiar with scripting. Let's step through it just a little bit. First, the script is written to use Jamf Pro's new API roles and clients feature. Here, I'm giving you instructions for how to create those settings and the privileges that you're going to need in order to be able to let this script run against your Jamf Pro server. You'll need to specify a few pieces of information like your Jamf Pro URL, client information, and a place to save your files. And by default, everything saves into /users/shared on your computer, but you can point it anywhere that you need. I include several functions like this one that help troubleshoot problems. Every call the script makes to the Jamf Pro API also returns a status code, and status codes in the 200 generally mean success. Status codes in the 400s generally mean failure. Status codes in the 500s generally mean that there's something wrong with the server or maybe your connection. I'm big on logging. These two functions log what's about to happen and then what actually happened. I'm authenticating to the server, success or failure. I'm downloading a list of smart computer groups, success or failure. I'm downloading the JSON for the computer pre-stage enrollments, success or failure. Here's a function that runs at the beginning of the script that shows what's needed to just to authenticate to Jamf Pro to get an API token. And because your environment might be very large and you may have hundreds or even thousands of objects in your server, the script will automatically renew that token every 15 seconds, or 15 seconds before it expires. So that's plenty of time to do the renewal. Here's the code that requests the unique IDs of all the objects for a particular object type. So for example, all the IDs of my policies. And here's the code that steps through that list of IDs one by one and downloads the XML. This is for the object types that you can only get through the classic API. I do the same for those object types that are only available through the Jamf Pro API as well. So here, I'm getting the list of IDs. And here, I'm iterating through that list of IDs, and I'm downloading each object's JSON data. And finally, this is the section of the script where I provide the details to download each object type. I provide both a friendly name and the API endpoint the script needs to use. And you'll notice it's in two sections. One section is for the classic API, and the other is for the Jamf Pro API. Not everything is migrated over to the new Jamf Pro API yet, so we still have to kind of keep a foot in the past. And as more things get moved over, the script is going to have to be updated. But it's a work in progress. It still has quite a while to finish. It'll probably be a few more years before everything is over in the Jamf Pro API. And if you look a few lines down, you'll see I've added pound signs to the front of a few lines. They're not called hashtags in scripting. Those are comments, and they prevent lines from running. So in this case, only healthcare customers probably need to ever download information about Healthcare Listener. So you can comment just a few lines for those items that you don't need to actually back up and version. Or you can comment more lines if you're only interested in backing up and versioning maybe just a handful of object types, like I just need my policies, or I just need my configuration profiles. And maybe all you want are policies and scripts. This script is for you if you're a scripter, or it's for your DevOps team if you're not. Again, it's an example of the code that you'd need to use to access the Jamf Pro API. It's not a solution, but I'm hoping you can take it and make it a solution that works in your environment. Even if it's something as simple as running it on a weekly basis to download and back up all of your important Jamf Pro object types to something as simple as a Dropbox folder. Now, I'm more than happy, by the way, to walk through it with anybody who needs some guidance. And you can leave feedback on that page. I'll finish up by talking about a presentation that I attended at last year's MacAdmins conference at Penn State, and I absolutely loved its message. John Welch gave a great session about what kind of IT superhero you want to be. And he called his talk, Be ye Batman or be ye Superman. Both of these are superheroes, and at the end of the day, they both end up saving the day, but they do it in different ways. One superhero always gets to the scene just in a nick of time or too late, and they end up having to clean up the mess that was made by the villain. And so what they're really doing is they're responding to what's happening. That's Superman. The other is methodical, is prepared, and plans for different eventualities. They expect something to happen. That's Batman. Be ye Batman, not Superman. All right, with that, happy to take any questions.
I've got the mic here. First off, round of applause for Bill, please. Are there any questions? Who wants to make me run across this room? Oh, you're good people.
Everybody was at the party.
No questions? I have a question.
Yes?
Is that change management feature now documented?
I don't think it is.
It's not.
I don't think it is.
But today I learned, and I've been at Jamf for 9.5 years, and I did not know that.
You too.
Yeah.
Another one of the smartest people at Jamf, and we still learn something new.
We do. We keep learning. No other questions, no thoughts. Oh, at the back of the room.
Ah.
Okay, hang on.
So that was really cool using Jamf Migrator to execute a backup. So Jamf, I'd never thought of using Jamf Migrator as a backup function. If you do a backup with Jamf Migrator, can you also use Jamf Migrator to take those local objects and write those back up into a Jamf instance, or do you just have to open up the XML and scrape out the data from them?
So the one thing I didn't do, and I glossed over it, now you're calling me on it, thank you, is I gave you a script for downloading, but I didn't really give you a script for uploading. And I do plan on adding a script for uploading, I just didn't have time to write that. But what you're talking about is that Jamf Migrator tool from Leslie, right? And I want to say, was it that or possibly one of his other tools that he recently added scripting to it, scripting capabilities to it?
It was that.
It was that, fantastic. So it is possible to actually automate something, and if you can do it in the GUI, I believe the script will also allow you to upload as well. So yeah, you could use that as a solution, as kind of an ad hoc solution, that Jamf Migrator tool that's out on github.com/Jamf, and you could even make that as a download, upload, or backup restore type tool, and you can script that if you're comfortable doing that. Does that answer your question? All right.
Anyone else? We have 1 minute and 20 seconds.
Ooh, I'm good.
Okay, I think with that?
Let's give it back to them.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Thank you again, Bill. Another round of applause, please.
Thank you much, everyone.